Hi, welcome back to Unchained Crochet. We are on our crochet journey with the Freebird Cape Scarf. I have my feather section completed and wanted to get into how we're going to go transition from using your first yarn to your second yarn. And as we switch to our second yarn, we're going to be marking off for our armholes. This is on my Instagram. If you look me up by my name, Unchained Crochet, you'll find this on my Instagram. Not a lot to dig through there. I just have a couple things up, and this is the last thing I have. There's two sides to it, so if you want to print it, you can download them both and print them up. So basically, this is this feather section, the green part here. That's what I've completed so far. When I started my starting chain, I first chained 240 because with both of these stitches, both the feather stitching and the Trinity stitch, you need an even number. So I started with 240, but then I decided once I got that far, putting my first row in of half doubles, that it was long enough. I was wrong, kind of to an extent. I'm going to remedy that, but I kind of wish I'd have gone a little bit farther. It's okay though. Because there's two different ways I can address that and just make it my own personal thing. One way would be to add these borders that I've included here. If you want borders, you can do borders. So you can make this section as long as you want and then add a border that's about 3 1/4 inch wide. All right, so although I don't think that's what I'm going to do. So back to how I started. I took off the stitches I didn't use. The chain numbers I didn't use was 16, so that left me with 224. So I started with 224 half doubles for my first row of the feather stitch. If you followed Creative Grandma's video for your feather stitch pockets, that's what you're going to use to just make a longer piece for your body. After I got a few, maybe 3 inches of this done, I went ahead and put some markers about where I thought the armholes would fall. So here is from arm to arm, and it kind of goes across your back, not really across your shoulders because you're going to have another 16 inches or so up above it with the Trinity stitch. So I put 2 markers there and went 7 inches out and put 2 markers there. So this would be what's hanging down below my armhole. So I'm going to show you how to quickly measure your piece, and then we're going to get into how we transition. Yours may not be the exact same transition as mine, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be. We are free birds. And I'm going to show you how I did mine in case you're using the same yarns and yours is working up comparably to mine. So to measure, we can do this very quickly. Once you have your feather stitch completed, and you'll want to measure this, the piece is supposed to be 32 inches by 73.5 to 80 inches long, somewhere around there, just depending on your preference. So to measure, I did in the feather stitch alone and my foundation row that I started with, I had about 15 1/4 inches. I stopped there because I decided to add a transition, a small transition section to switch to my other yarn. And I'll explain more about that later, but that's how wide my piece is. So all together with my transition, it is 16 inches. Dang close. Really, really close to 16 inches. So that's that. So let's talk the easy part. This is the easy part. Where I put the markers on my beginning section, my beginning edge, this is what I did. I found my middle, folded it in half, holding the corners together, find the middle of your piece. It's right here. Or you can count your stitches, half of whatever number of stitches you got on your first row, half of that, and mark it. Okay, so what you'll need now is stitch markers or some scraps of yarn. So I'm just going to show you how you can do this on your own. And this would be you want to mark after you do your transition, if you're doing a transition, before you start your next color. You want to mark that edge. I'm just showing you on this edge, okay? Because I'm still going to show later on in this video how I did my transitioning. So I'll be working still on that edge. So I'm going to place a marker at that center point. Just pull it through kind of like latch hook, or just tie it around there, it doesn't matter. But if you do it like latch hook, it'll pull out real easy. And from there, our middle section, I call it the shoulder neck section. It's really across your shoulder blades, not up here, it's down here, and down your arms some. It's hard to, I went by another pattern and kind of their dimensions they used, my inspiration piece, and went from there, because it's hard to say where exactly your armholes are going to fall when you put this piece on. Some of us have more rounded shoulders, some of us have more broad shoulders, some of us have, very defined shoulders, and it's going to stay up on you good. However you're going to wear your piece, it's hard to say, for each person, how long to make this piece. So if I'm holding it like this, I get 44 inches if I want them to come down to my wrist. But who's to say if the middle of the piece is going to fall right there? So this is why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it, because I followed their schematic, converted a bunch of gauge, but followed how they constructed theirs. So doing that, marking your middle, the whole shoulder neck section should be about 32 inches. If you're a bigger person like me, you might go a little bit bigger if you want to. You don't have to. I'm not. I think 32 inches is going to be fine for me. I am short, and I think this piece is probably going to fall lower on my back because I'm short. I don't have a long torso. So from your middle marker, take the 16-inch mark on your tape measure or ruler and hold it out, and that's where you're going to put another stitch marker. And then go down another 7 inches, and that's where you're going to put another stitch marker. So, and then you do the same to the other side. 16 inches out, and then another 7 inches from the next stitch marker that you just placed. 7 inches. So you should have, if you're doing my length, you're going to have, let's see, I didn't do the math portion of this. Once I add my borders or block it to the size I want, which is probably what I'm going to do, is hit it with my steam iron and kill it, just to make it, as long as I want. But you should have somewhere around 17 inches south of the pocket, not the pocket, sorry, the armhole. You should have about 16, 17 inches there. It will grow on you some with blocking. I want mine to. If you don't want yours to, don't be aggressive with your blocking. So that is pretty much it as far as measuring out. You've got your middle marker, 16 inches out from each side of that. Leave those. You can remove your middle marker after that. And then measure your little arm slit, your arm opening of 7 inches. Mark that. And that's the end, 7 inches out on both sides. That's the end of your marking. And that's the only time we're going to use that, because we're going to work from here up, and we're just going to leave that part open as we go and start our new stitch. Okay, so that's why I showed you on this end, because I'm still working on stitching on this end, and I want to get that on videotape. That's pretty much it. I hope you're having a fun journey, and hope this hasn't been too mind-boggling for you. I know that it could be difficult enough working on your own, but then when you work with someone who changes their mind or says, well, I can do this instead of this, in the middle of showing you how to do something, you're like, but what am I supposed to do? You're supposed to do whatever you go with, what you feel in your gut. You know, if you feel like, oh, I don't need to do, you know, this extra row she's doing, don't do it. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to explain to you why I'm doing it to my piece. So that's what's up next in this video. So now I'm going to show you how I'm doing my transitioning. I have already finished my feather stitch rows and gotten almost to the 16 inches I was looking for. And then I decided, well, I'm going to just add a half double crochet row because I started with a half double crochet row. That's how the feather stitch starts. And then I decided, no, that's too thin because we're going to stay equally bulky as far as this thickness goes with the Trinity stitch. So I looked at the half double, decided, no, I'm not quite ready. I'm not satisfied with that. So we are now bulking. This is how I'm doing mine. You may be doing yours differently if you're using different yarns than I am. And this is just what is working for me. You can make yours work the same for you. Just don't lose stitches. I decided, well, let's go ahead and add another row after that half double row. And this time we're doing a long single crochet stitch. So we're going single crochet over all those half doubles. So you should have, if you're doing this method, when you went back and started that half double crochet, you should have had a half double in the first half double, a half double around the first chain space, a half double right above your feather, a half double into the chain space, half double into the feathers top, and then a half double in every chain space. So basically every stitch in every chain space you're half doubling into or around. And then chain one, chain one, single crochet around your very first stitch you have, and then around that chain one space stitch we took, and get to this point. Let me show you on where I started. So I have single crocheted, I chained one, I single crocheted around that first half double, and then around the next half double that's in the chain space, and then around the next half double. So you're basically, I say around would be more that way, but you're going over it. So over the whole height of it, just like you've been planting your feather stitches, those little clusters that we've made with the feather stitch, you've gone over other stitches. So that's what we're doing. We're totally going over it. No wrap needed. Just single crochet, going over each one. And it's essentially just to bulk up this transition. We want to bulk it up so that you don't have a skinny, flimsy place between your two different fabrics you're creating. They're two different stitches, similar thickness. We want to keep this area similarly thick. So now we've come to the last space. We're going to go around that half double and then around or over that last one. You got to find where you were, where you went into. Basically, just stab right under at the base of that half double, that last one. Stab your hook in there and do a single crochet around it. And just to secure this in place, you can also do this, take a little slip stitch in that turning chain that you did. And then we're going to pull up a loop and cut your yarn, or just simply break it off like I'm going to do if it's single ply. You can do that fairly easily. and then just pull that little slip knot pretty tight. You'll bury that tail later. Okay, so that is how I am transitioning, and I'm going to pause this and get my other yarn prepared because I haven't done that. Bad girl. This is just a little bit to show you how I'm preparing my two skeins I'm using, and I'm holding double. I hate how these come in buns. That's what I call them, little buns. You can't really start from the middle. If you do, you're going to have a big old mess once it gets, you know, hollow. So I've got them both in a box and just spinning off, pulling off a bunch of it at one time from both strands, just holding the strands and pulling it loose like that. Getting about 3 or 4 yards off of each one at a time. Wrap it and just rinse and repeat. So that may be a tip if any of you are holding your yarn double. Okay, so now I have completed my feather stitch section and I'm done with that cookie yarn. I am going to mark the end I'll be working from, which is the last row that I just showed you. And I'm going to mark it just like I did my other edge when I was just showing you, for example. So I have found my middle, holding corner to corner. And this isn't rocket science, this portion here, because you're going to adjust where you have your markers to make them both even on each side of your center. So main thing right now is find the center. And like I said before, I'll say it again, you're just going to take your thread here, hold it like a loop, pinch your middle, and just put this right at the middle. It doesn't matter if we end up with an odd or even number of stitches in the middle section. We're just going to deal with it. Okay. Now I'm going to measure out from that marker. I'm going to measure out 16 inches on both sides. So it comes here to this feather stitch. I'm going to put one right behind it. Okay, mark there. The main thing we're after is let any extra fall to the middle section here. The one I'm marking up right now at this middle. And then measuring off for the arm opening. I want 7 inches, and you will too, but you got to figure you're going to be blocking most likely, so you might want to go 6.5, and I'm going to go ahead and do 6.5 on mine. I know I said 7 before, but I'm just considering that I'm blocking. You can go with 6, 7 as 6s or 7s, it doesn't matter. 6.5 is right there. And these markers are going to stay on a while. We're going to take a look at how our Trinity stitch pocket looks. Just hold those two markers together. Hold your fabric together. Don't stretch it on either side. And place your other marker at your 7-inch mark, whatever you're using. Okay. So there's our markers. We can now take the middle marker out if you want to. You don't have to. You can leave it in there. I'll just leave it in there for now. I have switched to a J hook. If you've watched the other videos, you will know why I've switched to the J hook, because of my pocket difference in my 2 yarns. This one was working up too thin, too flimsy with just a single strand, so I doubled it. I went from using an H hook to using a J hook with this yarn held double, this yarn held single. So I wanted the same thickness. This one's a bit heavier, but it doesn't matter. They're the same size. The gauge is the same. I don't know how that worked out, but it is what it is. So I'm switching to a J hook for my Trinity stitch section. So when I started this, and if you used Fiber Spider's video to do your Trinity stitch, you notice how he started with a chain. He just went right into doing the Trinity stitch. He didn't do a foundation row like Charmed Grammy did on hers. This is where I started on that pocket. So you can go ahead and do that with your second yarn if you want to. Whatever you're most comfortable with, but I'm choosing, and this is how I'm going to show you, I'm choosing to do another row of half double crochet, and then I'm going to skip over the armhole and do foundation half double crochet, and then continue with the half double crochet on across, just like that. So what we want to do first before we get started with stitching the new yarn is count your stitches from your corner to your first marker. So I'm going to pause and count, and I just want you to make those match, and then stop and do the same to your armholes. After you adjust these as needed, you know, make them the same number of stitches. Make your holes the same number of stitches if they're not already. And then anything you have left over can just go toward the middle. All right. And try to get even numbers in these sections. Okay. Shoot for the nearest even number when you adjust. Okay. So I just counted my front piece here, and from corner to that first marker, I had this looped into my stitch marker, looped into my 41st stitch. So that leaves 40 free for this section. This is where my armhole will start. So I went and counted this back section here, and I counted that I had 42. So I moved the stitch marker down one so that it's in the 41st stitch marker as well. Again, that will start the armhole stitch from that bottom edge, whichever edge we start from. So I'm going to stick with you here, and we're going to do the armhole section. Okay, the armhole section is going to include this stitch and most likely that stitch. We're going to try to get an even number, counting both of those. So counting from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, counting where that marker is at. So because I only measured 6.5, I'm going to go in toward the middle with one. I'm going to move it toward the center section to make it even. And make it even 22. And I'm going to double count that just to be sure. But I'm moving it in toward the middle. So my armhole just grew by 1 stitch. Counting with the stitch marker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So now I want to count the same way, same fashion. Count with your stitch markers, 22. Well, for me, it's 22. You work your own number if you want to use bigger or smaller. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So this one I'm moving to number 22. So this one is coming out a bit. So see, the center wasn't quite center. It was, you know, shifted off 1 stitch, basically, when I measured. So that's why I count from the edges inward. And then whatever falls to the middle, if it's not a gargantuan number of stitches, can just fall to the middle. All right, so now we're ready to go ahead and get rid of these scraps here. I'm still toying with going straight into the star stitch. If I go straight into the star stitch, one side is going to start looking like this. And then when I wear it to the reverse side or flip it upside down, inside out, the other side's going to look like that. Can I live with that? I think I can. But I think this side here, we'll just see how it looks. If it starts looking from the back side like this yarn is becoming incorporated into that flower shape, I don't know if I want to do it. So I may go ahead and just do, I think I'm just going to go ahead and do a double crochet row. That will give me the height and similar look to this transition space right there. That would keep it the most simple, especially since considering, you know, we've got these armholes to deal with, and we can just jump over those with that foundation half double crochet. I just snagged one of my feathers. Okay, so I am going to start just like here where I finished off that section. I'm going to start from there and turn like I'm just doing another row. Otherwise, it might look a little curly in that area. I don't have any idea where I'm going to put this ball. I need a big wooden box, a heavy one, to hold that. All right. So we're going to start with our slip knot. Leave plenty of tail if you're using this single ply type yarn, the roving type. Leave plenty of tail. I would guess at least 12 to 16 inches, just so that you can anchor it very well into your stitches and bury it, and anchor it again with a knot and bury it some more. It does tend to come undone in the wash if you just weave your tail in and out. So we can start this either with a slip stitch or a standing half double crochet. I think I'm going to start with a standing half double crochet. So you're going to go into that first stitch there. And do your half double. This will just create a nice clean edge to both armhole edges. I think it'll look much nicer to do the foundation half double crochet. And if you wanted to, you could alternatively throw more options out there, but you could alternatively do the same thing you did over here, do a half double crochet and then do a single crochet row all the way over it. You could do that as well, but this is the same thickness. That's what I was going for. That was the whole purpose of doing this. So I'm going to just stick with that half double crochet. Keep it simple, stupid. And I'm going to stay with you and show you how to do that foundation half double crochet over the armhole area. Whatever your armhole stitch number was, that you might want to write that down if you're not going to do it right away, because that's how many foundation half doubles we're going to do. Just keep it the same number. If you lay your piece down and you start to see it kind of ruffle or flare out really bad at the edge, just go ahead and skip a couple stitches along the way. You just want to be sure you skip the same amount at your other end. Or you could do a half double through 2 stitches like that, make 2 into 1. See how I did that? Wrap, go into the stitch, pull up a loop, just go straight into the next one, pull up a loop, then you've got 4 on your hook, go through all of them. If you need to eat up a stitch because it's wavy. If it's very wavy, you're going to need to do something about that yarn or change your hook. Go down to a smaller hook. Okay, now remember we said these markers are included with our armhole. So that counted with our 22. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into this stitch here that we just did, and we're going to do a foundation half double crochet. Get this where you can see it. Wrap your hook, yarn over, go into the stitch. You can get a couple of those strands if you're using double. You can go, sometimes I'll go into this twisted looking back of it, move those 2 front ones out of the way, and go into that instead. And then for the foundation part of it, you want to yarn over and pull through the first loop, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So that keeps the height consistent. I'm going to look for that twisted stitch back there. That's what I'm going into right there, that back portion that looks twisted. So that was 1. And this can be a bit fiddly. It is especially fiddly for me because I'm doubling my yarn. Don't forget to stop. Instead of pulling through all 3, you want to just pull through 1 first and then pull through all 3. That was 2. This is our 3rd one. It's about preference. If you want to go through the front, that's fine. I just like to catch up more yarn so that that's not a flimsy looking edge. Just keep going, and you can count when you think you're getting close to your 22 stitches. I'm going to pause until I get to my 22, and then I'll pick back up with you. Okay, so I've got my 22 half double foundation chain there. And you can see how from the bottom of this, it kind of, the last stitch kind of wants to curve up. I'm going to go into my next free stitch. This is after the marker, because remember the markers on our armhole counted toward the armhole. So I'm just going to go into the next free stitch, but I'm also going to wrap and insert into this first, into the base of that, so that that kind of squares off that edge. So I've pulled through my next free stitch on the body, and I'm just going to pull through all 4 hooks on the all 4 loops, sorry. Blah, blah. And keep moving along with our half double crochets. And when you get to the next armhole, you're just going to do the same thing. You're going to do your 22 foundation half doubles, and then pick back up, you know, working a stitch on the outside of each of those markers, just to the outside. Okay, that makes your armhole right there. So I'm going to pause and I'll finish this row, and then you can come back for the next row where we start the Trinity stitch. Okay, I have just completed my transition rows to the new color. I got my armholes in. Once you got those in, you can go ahead and take your stitch markers out. And you're going to go ahead and start with your Trinity stitch. And I'm just going to go ahead and do a little review with you of that. At the end of your foundation row, you're going to chain one. The yarn sticks to itself so bad. So chain one and turn. Now we're going to start our star stitch. Remember how you start your star stitch. You've got your chain one. You're going to single crochet into that very first stitch, the stitch that you're right above. Then we're going to go in and pull up a loop in that same stitch, the next one, and the next one after that. So we want to have 4 loops total on our hook. Did I say Trinity stitch or did I say star stitch? This is our Trinity stitch. Looks like the star stitch, but it is not. So once you pull through all 4 loops, just like when you did your pockets, you're going to chain one, and then you're going to go start your next little flower looking thing right here in that same stitch you just went into at the end of the first one. So back into the same stitch, pull up a loop, go in one more, and then a third one. So now you've got 4 loops on your hook again, pull through all 4, chain one. Keep doing that across your row. If for some reason you find you get to the end of your row and you've got an extra stitch or something, you know, just do what you have to do to make it look right. And don't forget, when you get to the end of this row, you don't have a chain one before you single crochet into that last stitch. So your last stitch should look like this, but reverse. It should look like this, where you've got your 3 into 1, no chain space, and then just your single crochet in your last stitch when you get to the end of the row. Should look just like this end, but a mirror image. So go ahead and stitch on across. If you somehow ended up with an odd number of stitches, I would just do away with a stitch, and you can easily do it like this. Let's just pretend we're there and we've got, you know, 4 stitches left or something. We've got more stitches than we need. We'll just do it as we did before. And I've got an extra one left over. You could do it this way. And just single crochet into that. So it's like that. Technically, you should end with this. Say this is our end stitch. It should look like this, where you single crochet in that same stitch that you just went into. But if you end up with an extra, just eat it up that way I showed you. No chain. Go straight into that last extra stitch and do away with that gap. Okay, so you are set to go with your Trinity stitch. Trinity stitch your hearts away and just get your second section the same size or thereabouts as your first section. Nobody's going to come up and measure your piece. I promise. The stitch police are not coming to your door. Have some confidence in your skills and be brave and just do it. Just keep on going with your Trinity stitch until it gets about the same height as your feather stitch. Sorry for all the stammering today. I'm starting to get a little bit of a sore throat, and I'm going to have to rest up and take a nap. Bye for now.